Hey y'all, welcome to Figuring It Out with me, Kelly Renee. I hope everyone is settled into the new year. So I have this conversation with my friend Will once a week, and we talk about stuff that's going on in our lives. Last week when we spoke, I told him I was going to post a new video before we spoke again. Well, as the days went by, Monday was really the only day I thought about a topic, and now it's Thursday, so I guess I better get busy. It's been a bit since I posted a video. What I want to talk about today is voting. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signed Bill HB 458 into law recently, and it requires a photo ID to vote in person, either early or on election day. As long as you were registered to vote in the past, it used to be that you could use an alternate ID like a current utility bill, a bank statement, or paycheck, as long as it had your name and current address on it. The new law also includes a requirement for the BMV to issue free state ID cards to those who request them. Now, I don't have an issue with requiring a photo ID when I vote in person, and it feels like a common sense step. Well, with all the allegations of voter fraud, the fact that we changed this law makes me wonder how many people actually used alternate IDs in the last election. I also wonder how many people don't have a current valid ID in Ohio. Renewing a driver's license has been made easier, and IDs are valid for longer periods of time now. So, unless you move a lot or you changed your name, it really seems like a pretty simple thing to stay on top of. Now, I'm sure there are some who will disagree for many reasons, yet it's the law. So let's focus on solutions and find ways to help people without the proper ID to get it done. Lots of us have a hard time adapting to change, especially when that change requires us to do something different. Now, much of the criticism centers around making it more difficult for people to vote. Changing the ID requirement is the least of those concerns in my mind, particularly with this new law. Reducing the days for ballots by mail, collection sites, and reduced early voting times creates a much greater barrier as it impacts many more people. These added restrictions are also part of the new law. Well, there are some who may have the capacity to challenge the new law in court. I'm not one of them. So I'm a solutions girl. So let's talk about how we proceed and not leave people out of the process. I suggest it would be wise to ramp up efforts now to ensure people who have the right to vote have the required ID, and remind folks that voting early when possible to avoid congestion at the polls on election day. This is work that can begin now. It's the law, so let's figure out how to make it work for everyone. Getting a photo ID in Ohio is a fairly easy process. There are a few pieces of information you're required to provide, like a birth certificate, social security card, and address confirmation. All the details are available at www.bmv.ohio.gov. For most people, like I said, it's a straightforward process. It gets a little more complicated if you're new to the state or you've had a name change due to marriage or divorce. Not impossible, but you still need some additional information. When I volunteered with a nonprofit that supported unhomed people, one of the common challenges we saw was tracking down things like birth certificates, getting replacement social security cards, and state IDs. Not insurmountable by any means. However, it does take a little time and effort. Beginning this process now will make the voting experience much smoother later. Waiting until the last minute is a recipe for frustration and disappointment. For those in the LGBTQ plus community, it can be a little stickier, especially where name and gender changes are involved. The last I heard, Tennessee is the only state in the country that still doesn't have a path for gender marker changes on birth certificates. Of course, with all the anti-trans legislation being submitted these days, that could change, even in states where a path now exists. In Ohio, it is possible today. And as of this video, so taking steps now, making it getting IDs easier if that's important to you. For me, my experience began with a legal name change in Tennessee. It wasn't complicated, but then again, I hired a local attorney who accompanied me to the hearing in court. A friend of mine did her paperwork herself in another county and accomplished the same thing for less money and no court appearance required, as I recall. Now note, the rules about this can change based on the county you reside in. Well, once my name was changed, I began the process of updating my birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, concealed carry permit, bank accounts, loan and mortgage accounts, employer records, passport, education records, and my DD-214 from my naval military service. I went so far as updating relevant, meaning the most recent previous employer records, high school and college transcripts, and health accounts. Now, not all of these are required for voting purposes, of course, but I really wanted to make sure my records match my identity. There are more relevant, those are more relevant for things we run into, like applying for employment, credit, etc. As most of you know, transition is a process and takes a lot of effort beyond the emotional and mental effort. Aligning our identities with ourselves is a process. Each one of us has to enter it at our own pace and on our own terms. When we struggle with identity, who we tell, how we reveal ourselves to the rest of the world is a very personal matter. Once we decide to come out to the world, that's when most of these legal changes take place. Since legally changing your name is a public matter, it's difficult to conceive you could be stealthy about the process. If you're not ready, then voting with your birth name and gender may be the only option should you choose to exercise your right to vote. That's a choice only you can make. The last thing I want to talk about with regard to the voting process today is the importance of planning ahead. This is important for all of us, regardless of identity issues. Early voting, mail-in ballots, and election days are well publicized. Planning ahead and being prepared makes a big difference. As voting options are changed, and in many cases removed or further restricted, it's even more important to plan ahead so we don't get left out of the process. As we went through this past election cycle, I tried to stay on top of the issues and candidates that appealed to me and those who shared my values. I knew going in who I favored and why. I'm not really comfortable with being ill-prepared for such an important duty. And yes, I do consider it a duty as a citizen of this county, state, and country. It's a small price to pay for such an awesome responsibility. Well, that's all for today. Thinking about y'all today. You are valued, you are loved, you are oh so precious. And remember, life's too short. Be kind, do good. Let's talk soon.